My incident takes place in Sacramento, California in 2007 in my very own home. On this night, both of my daughters, a 1-year-old and 2-year-old, finally fell asleep around 11 p.m. My husband was messing on the internet looking up poker chips. I was doing the laundry and some last-minute cleaning. It went from 11 p.m. to 1 a.m. pretty quickly as I was kept busy folding and ironing. I went back to the laundry room and I was taking out the dry clothes, putting it into the laundry bucket, and then loading up the wet ones from the washer into the dryer when my home phone rang. I thought I'd let the answering machine pick it up, but I didn't want it to wake up my kids, so I ran into my room. I looked on the caller ID and it said private, but for some reason I answered the phone anyway and said, "Hello?" A very weak and sick but clear woman's voice answered back and asked me, "Patty, what are you doing?" I answered the call back and said, "Oh, I'm doing the laundry and doing some last-minute cleaning." The person said, "It is 1 o'clock in the morning. Why are you still up? And why are you cleaning?" All of a sudden, I felt this cold chill and I felt scared and immediately responded, "Well, Corey's up messing around on the internet." I said this because I didn't want to give the impression that I was home alone, because I wasn't, just in case it might be someone I don't know. And I figured I'd finish the conversation, but I continued to suspiciously ask, "Who is this?" The weak, sickly voice answered back in Hmong, in my own language, and said, "Patty, this is Daisy, stupid." Right there and then, I recognized the voice. Oh, it is my only sister, Daisy. I asked her why she was calling me so late. Was everything okay? She said in Hmong again in the very same sick voice, "I am at the hospital, having a baby. It hurts so much." I was worried and then realized that it is the reason why this person sounds the way they do on the phone. Now, my sister Daisy was pregnant and not due until later that month, so I replied, "But you're not due until later on the 17th, so isn't the baby a little over a week early?" The phone conversation continued back and forth this way for a few minutes, with me wanting to know what was wrong and Daisy telling me that she was having some complications. Her doctor may potentially have to perform an emergency C-section. She couldn't tell me why or what was happening to the baby and why the doctor decided to just go with that option without letting her at least try to have the baby on her own. I asked her what hospital she was at and she told me Mercy General, the same hospital I had my kids at, and then I continued to ask her if she would like me to go and be there with her for support. Now, keep in mind that Daisy's voice still sounded weak and sickly. She continued to me, "No, I'll be okay. The nurse is coming. It is time to have my child. I'll talk to you later." And then she hung up the phone. So I hung up the phone too, not thinking anything of it. But I was still a little bit concerned. I knew my mother-in-law had just gotten off of work, so I called her around 1:20 a.m. My mother-in-law works for Kaiser in a very big hospital as a medical transcriptionist. She studies a lot, so I figured that she would know what to do and tell me as to why Daisy's doctor wanted to give an emergency C-section. The two of us talked for a while. To be more specific, we talked for another hour and a half. My mother-in-law and I both hung up on the phone after she assured me that my sister's doctor is the professional and for me not to worry. I was already done with my laundry, so I went to the computer room to tell my husband that I was late and that I was going to bed. I laid myself to bed and then realized I should text message my sister's husband just to make sure the C-section went okay and my sister and the baby were okay and that the baby is healthy. I got no response back, but I just figured that they were busy and the hospital did not allow them to keep their cell phones on because the wireless signals can mess up with the hospital machines. I don't know if that's true or not, but I guess. I fell asleep and I woke up the next day to a missed call message on my cell phone, and I received one text message from them. I was getting excited to hear that she was having a baby, and this is where it gets weird. The message read, "Huh? Patty, what are you talking about? Daisy did not have the baby yet. She did not have a C-section." So I called them and my sister Daisy answered the phone. Confused, I asked her why she called me and told me she was in the hospital and was having complications and that her doctor was going to give her an emergency C-section. Daisy replied, "Patty, I'm not sure who you talked to, but that was not me. My husband and I were both asleep last night by 10 p.m. I was freaking out. I felt that cold chill again and felt like I was being watched and listened to. Immediately, I told Daisy that I would call her back. No one knows my home phone because we all have cell phones, so everyone has my cell phone saved on their phones instead. My home phone is only there for business calls more than personals. I started to panic and called up families and friends and anyone that I thought of that may have came across my home phone number and explained to them what happened. Everyone told me that no, they did not call me and explain to me what they were doing around that time, and it made sense why they couldn't have been the person to make that call. Sounding crazy, I called my mother-in-law to make sure it wasn't a dream, that I was really talking to her for about an hour and a half after talking to Daisy for 20 minutes. She assured me that we were both talking to each other on the other ends. Then, she asked me something that made a lot of sense. She asked me that when I was in the hospital, was I in the mood to be making phone calls? Was there even a phone in the labor room? And I thought for a minute. And it was right. When you're in labor and going through all those contraction pains, you want to be thinking about calling somebody. And that if it was Daisy about to have a C-section, there would be a lot of prepping to do. I was at a dead end. My heart was racing and I felt cold and numb. Was there someone trying to pull a trick on me? I called my home phone company to see if they knew or kept a record of where the phone call came from and that maybe someone was stalking me. But they don't trace any calls or have a record of any calls unless I requested for the call to be traced before the call was made. I was still scared, but I thought to myself, everybody probably thinks that I'm crazy. So I took that little 20-minute phone call conversation and stuck it in the back of my head. The next day, I don't know if this incident has anything to do with what happened the day before, but my husband, kids, and I were on our way to my parents' house to get the last-minute preparations done for Easter and to have lunch. I was talking on my cell phone with my Auntie Alice, and while in the middle of her talking, the phone line went quiet. I thought maybe I may have lost her call and looked at my phone and nope, sure enough, my cell phone still indicated that the line was active. I put the phone back up to my ear and yelled, "Hello? Hello?" And then all of a sudden, I heard a loud, deathly scream, like someone was in a lot of panic, and then the line went quiet again. I continued to say, "Hello?" And all of a sudden, I heard my Auntie Alice talking, like she didn't even know that the call may have dropped. I asked her if she heard anything and she said no. She was talking the whole time, telling me what Easter game she was bringing for the kids to play with. She didn't hear anything. It was right there and then that the phone call finally dropped. I tried calling my aunt back, but I could not get through. I saw everyone the next day for Easter. I didn't want to seem any more crazy than I already made myself look, but I continued to ask everyone again, and everyone gave me the same answer. This left me with no answer and a dead end, so I decided to let it go. A week later, Daisy had her baby at the very same hospital. To this day, I don't know who called. Who did I talk to for 20 minutes? How would they have known my sister was pregnant, and why did they call? All I know is that my sister's doctor wasn't sure of a due date for her son. He kept telling her it might be on the 13th or on the 23rd and settled with the 17th of April. I think this phone call was from someone trying to tell me that my sister was going to have her baby soon. This was a pretty good story. I liked it. This was over 10 years ago, and I still remember it like it was just yesterday. My parents went out of town and it was just me and my brothers left. My oldest brother had the bright idea to go camping. I told him that I didn't want to go because I have experienced paranormal activities whenever I go out into the woods. My oldest brother then told me that he'll protect me and to not worry, so I told him that I trusted him. Then the next day, all 6 of my brothers and I went camping. When we got to the campsite, we started to set up our tents, and then we made a fire and made some food that we brought from home. 20 minutes go by, and I heard someone whisper in my ear saying, "You're next." At that moment, I knew that my brothers and I were not alone. didn't dare to tell my brothers because I knew if I did, they'll say that I'm just being delusional, so I chose not to tell anybody. Later on that night, I woke up and it was already 4:30 in the morning. I went out to go pee because I had to pee really bad. When I came back home, my brothers were gone. It's like they were never there at all. But then I just brushed it off and said that they probably went to go pee as well. 8 minutes go by and I realized that they never came back inside the tent. I got up and called their name but did not get a response back. That's when I heard the same voice whisper in my ear saying, "I'm right next to you." That's when I turned around and looked behind the tent and saw a Hmong lady dressed in traditional clothes screaming at me and saying in Hmong, "Go home, this isn't your place. Leave my area or else I'll take that small soul of yours." Then I woke up, and this whole time it was just a dream. It was already 10:38 in the morning. I sat up in the tent crying because I was so scared that my soul was going to be taken away from me. I was afraid that I'd never be able to see my family ever again. Afterwards, my brothers and I packed up our things and left the area. A week later, I got really sick and my brothers had to call a shaman. When the shaman came to check up on me, he told me that there was a strong ghost attached to me and that she would not let me go until she has gotten a hold of my soul. So the shaman said that we had to call my spirit back, and if we don't do it now, my soul will be taken away. 2 months go by and I felt way better. Ever since that happened to me, I never went camping ever again. Thank you to the viewer who submitted this story. They said to never go camping in Rochester, Minnesota. If you're interested in submitting your own stories, please do so at HmongChronicles@gmail.com. Here's the next story. My sister-in-law and her family had just moved into their new home, but something wasn't right about the house. At night, they would sometimes hear a baby crying out loud, but didn't think too much of it. Then, one day, they began to notice that their mom had tied a pacifier on top of their bedroom ceiling. So they asked their mom why she had done that, and their mom told them that a baby ghost had been coming to her at night and asking to be fed. It scared her, and so the mom decided to tie the pacifier onto the ceiling for the baby ghost to use instead. But that did not stop the ghost. A shaman told them that the ghost baby wants a mother and saw my sister-in-law, aka the mom, as its own mother. And in order for her to make the ghost baby understand that she is not its own mother, she needs to have another baby. A few months go by and she has another baby, and so the ghost stops bothering her. But one night, after a long day at work, the mom came home to find that she would be sleeping alone since her younger sister was sleeping over at some friends. She was facing the wall when she heard a baby giggling. She slowly turns towards the sound that is behind her, and she saw a baby girl with black curly hair playing with her behind her back. This deeply disturbed her, but she slowly turned towards the wall and prayed for the ghost baby to leave. Then she turns back to see if the spirit was still there, but it had already left. Soon they moved out of the house and bought a brand new house. The mother claims to have seen the ghost baby in their new home, saying that it had followed them there. But the spirit doesn't seem to mean any harm. Usually she would just play hide and seek, scaring the crap out of the family. Ooh, that's kind of creepy. Here's a story that happened to my husband and I while we were still dating. So one night, as my husband was waiting on his friends to come pick him up from my place, I told him to go straight home and not to do any stupid guy stuff. Well, that loser didn't listen to me like most guys do, so his friends and him decided to go cruising. It was around 11 p.m. and they were just driving out in the countryside where people do farming and growing corn. They were blasting music out loud and enjoying their ride when my husband heard the faint sound of the qing. He thought that maybe he was thinking too much, or perhaps it was just the instrumental of the music, but as he listened more closely, it was definitely the sound of the qing playing. So he turned to his buddy that was seated in the back with him and asked if he also heard the sound as well. All the guys thought he was going crazy, so they turned off the music and listened. And then, sure enough, all the guys heard the sound of the gun, and right there and then my husband and the driver sees this old Hmong guy walking on the side of the road in Hmong clothes, but they can kind of see through him, like he's translucent. So, the driver did a quick U-turn and sped the heck out of the countryside. When my husband got home, he told his mom, and his mom demanded to talk to the driver so she could confirm that the both of them saw the man and were not hallucinating. And sure enough, they both were the only ones out of the 5 friends that saw the man, but all of them heard the sound of the gun. Here's a story that happened to my brother-in-law. So in our town, we have this lake that everyone goes fishing at, but it's pretty haunted at night. I do know that the patrol officer will close the lake and close its gate at 8 p.m. Well, there's this little lighthouse midway towards the other side of the lake where people can go swimming instead of fishing. The story goes that once there was a mother who had lost her child to the water. Every day she would go and wait by the lighthouse for her kid to come back until she passed away. Some people have claimed to see her at night, and maybe that's the reason that the lake is closed at 8 p.m. Well, my brother-in-law and his buddies decided to go to the lake and kick it and drink. At this time, it was very, very late into the middle of the night. I asked him why they would choose that haunted lake out of all the other places, and he said that they were stupid and that the lake was easy to get into. Besides, they thought that they were tough. As they were chilling on one side of the table, overlooking the lake and talking, someone mentioned about the story of the lonely ghost mother who awaits her child at the lighthouse. As the story of the ghost mother was mentioned, they all spotted this glowing light on the path to the lighthouse, and when they looked more closely, it was in the shape of a woman floating along the path, but she was glowing like an angel. They were all stunned and shocked, frozen in their places, until one of the guys screamed a girly, blood-curdling scream and took off running into the direction of the parked cars. I guess that must have broken all of the other guys' frozen trance, and the next thing you know, the rest of the group dropped their beers and raced towards the car. My brother-in-law said that the car he was in, the driver was in such a panic that he was shaking and could not stick the keys into the ignition. Wow, talk about movie. He did it, and all the other 3 cars backed up at the same time, almost colliding with each other, and they all sped away. So he confirmed that the ghost stories of the lonely lighthouse mother is true. There are definitely more sightings and incidents about the lake, but just don't plan to stick around past 7 p.m. I don't know if you guys got that one text about not answering a phone call from Laos or whatever. It's been going around since last week or something. Well, anyways, one of my niece's sister-in-law received a text message like that. Well, her husband saw it and he quickly turned it off. My sister-in-law asked her husband what it was, and he said that it was nothing and for her to go to sleep. She couldn't fall back asleep, so she just laid there with the lights dimmed low. Because her husband was going back to sleep, she didn't want to bother him, and instead she was looking for comfort, so she stared at one of her stuffed animals. Typically, that stuffed animal that she has, it tends to give her comfort. Well, that night, it didn't. The more and more she kept on looking at it, the more the stuffed animal started to distort and get a little scary. My sister-in-law got scared and turned away from it. Just a few minutes after that, the room got cold and she felt an eerie presence in the room. All of a sudden, whatever it was in the room just sat on her. She was struggling very hard and eventually it got off of her but didn't quite leave the room. She woke up her husband and told him to put his feet next to her in case that thing came back. Instead of doing what she asked, he got into an argument with her. They got mad at each other and they slept apart from each other. As they both continued to lay there, her husband started to tell her how uncomfortable the room was getting. They didn't know what was the cause of it, but the sister-in-law realized that everything started happening right after they received the text message. She asked what was in the text message, and he finally told her about the text. She thought that since it was a chain letter, they should send it out. They did, of course, and after they sent it, they felt the room much more brighter and more safe. One of my friends told me about this curse, and she said it happened about many years ago, and I'm not sure if it's true. People have claimed that it has taken a few lives, and it's targeting more towards General Bing Pao because he wanted to overthrow Laos. I don't know if it's actually true, but she claims that it is, so beware. I don't know, man. I don't know. Getting a text about maybe it's like an invitation to like a Hmong CIA, and like with that they're like, oh, we're gonna go back to Blote and Tonyala or something like that. Anyways. Not too long ago, just sometime last year, things started to happen to me. I used to wake up in the middle of the night hearing my products move on the counter. Things like toothpaste and hairspray, face wash, etc. I'm in the master bedroom, so my bathroom is just right there. I always used to see this little girl as well. One night, I was just about to fall asleep when I saw a shadow walk over next to me, and I think it was the little girl. I felt her put her head on my shoulder. This freaked me out, and I've always hated sleeping alone. Now I have to have my husband there. This all happened when he was still working the schedule between second and third shift. Back in the day, we recently moved away into a new house, and one day, after school, I went upstairs to change my clothes. As I was looking in the mirror, I noticed that the reflection of the room was moving and shaking. I turned around and everything looked fine. As I needed to finish tying my hair, I turned back to look at the mirror and saw the same thing. Because of this, I screamed at the top of my lungs for my mom. She came upstairs, followed by my siblings, and asked me what was wrong. I pointed to the mirror and said, "Look, the room is moving." My mom pulled me closer and said, "Don't worry, if you haven't done anything to a ghost, it won't harm you." We all went downstairs, sat on the couch, and turned the TV on. My mom went to the kitchen and made us dinner, and we all pretended as if nothing happened. At least, we tried to. A couple of days later, we went to my cousin's house. They lived about 2 blocks away, and I told them about what happened. They were asking me all sorts of questions, and then my uncle poked his head into the room and asked, "Did it happen while the train was coming?" We lived 2 blocks away from the train tracks, and it was a new house, and I was 8. So yeah, it turns out the uncle just used common sense. Something that I swear OGs like to say this generation of kids don't have. Like they say, oh, you got a degree, but you're still not that smart. And sometimes I can't help but agree with them. This one is one that my uncle told me. It was during the time of the war. His father died when he was little, and his mother died when he was a teenager, so he didn't have much left in the world and went and joined the military. After he completed his training, they offered to send him to a different camp. He was okay with it since he wanted to see the world and get more pay. That night, he dreamt of his mother, and she warned him to not go and to stay where he was at. Morning comes and he tells his commanding officer that he changed his mind. He had to take care of some stuff first. So he stayed behind, and the other guys who volunteered left in the truck. A day later, he got the news that everyone who was in the truck died because they were all gunned down. He thanked his mom for saving him and has listened to his dreams ever since. He told me to be wary of bad dreams because they foreshadow a bad future. A few years ago, my sister-in-law took her 3-year-old daughter to a funeral. For those of you who live in Minnesota, this is the old funeral home on Dale. It's no longer there. Anyways, if you've ever been to the funeral home, there is a hallway that separates the room where the men sit and play cards from the room where people sit with the dead. My sister-in-law told me that as they entered the funeral home, she grabbed my niece's hand and walked down the hallway. My niece kept on lagging behind and looking back. My sister-in-law didn't pay too much attention to this because she was saying hi to people and doing small talk as they walked down the hallway. Because my sister-in-law wanted some coffee, they went into the kitchen and came back through the same hallway. Still, my niece continued to lag behind, and my sister-in-law had to tug her along. Then they went to the side where people sit with the dead. That room also has an aisle separating the men from the women. Anyways, my sister-in-law finally got fed up with my niece lagging behind and needed to keep on pulling her. She finally asked my niece, "What are you doing? Walk nicely." My niece replied with, "Mommy, who's that lady following me?" At this point, she looked past my niece and didn't see anybody. There were a lot of people around, but it didn't look like anybody was following them. Needless to say, she grabbed my niece and they came home right away. You all know that old belief that until children get their adult teeth, they are more susceptible to seeing things. Here goes the story about my brother-in-law's friend's wife. I'm going to call her Betty, since I don't want to reveal her real name. Well, when Betty was younger, she had this demon that liked her, so he would always haunt her. And you know how sometimes ghosts and demons could sit on top of you and you can't move? Well, her demon always did that to her, and she said that she can feel its presence lingering around before it begins to attack her. She also mentions that when it comes to her onto her bed, she could literally feel like a person is climbing into bed and sitting on top of her. Before she knows it, it's on top of her, and she could feel the pressure as if someone was sitting on her. Her parents got her grandma to do a jingle bell to chase the demon away, and so the jingle bell took place and the grandma locked the demon somewhere inside Betty's house. Betty and her family moved away, and she is to never go near that block or the house because if she does, then the demon will recognize her and follow her back. Many years later, Betty has 4 kids and a husband, and she's the type of cool wife that lets her husband's homies come kick it whenever they wanted. So, one night, she felt the demon's presence again, and it came to her while she was sleeping and gave her sleep paralysis again. Before the demon got off of her, he told her he was going to take her with him this time and pulled her leg. Her husband was sleeping next to her, so when she finally freed herself from the demon, she quickly woke up her husband and told him that the demon has come back after all these years. Dun dun dun, and she was so scared she called her grandma and told her what happened. From that point on, her grandma wanted to speak with the husband. When the husband got on the phone, Betty's grandma told him that the demon had taken Betty's soul when it pulled her leg, and that it's going to be too late to save her if they don't come to her house right away, which is about an hour and a half drive away. They were supposed to do a jingle bell so that Betty would not die. So the husband quickly hung up the phone and called all his homies to help lend some cash because he has to do jingle bell right away. 30 minutes later after the conversation, he shows up at my brother-in-law's house to borrow some money, and my brother-in-law gave him $100 and some of the other homies gave him cash as well. Wow, talk about a good group of friends. Within an hour, they left to the grandma's place to do the jingle bell, and they had to buy these huge candles and home papers and all that stuff. So that's probably where the money went to. It took the grandma about 2 days to catch the demon. 2 whole days. She then locked the demon inside this jar and told him that if the demon is hungry, ask the grandma and that she will feed it. If the demon needed anything, she will do her best to fulfill it, but to leave Betty alone because she is married. Later that day, they also did a ceremony that ties the husband's and wife's soul together. We later found out that the demon was a different demon that attacked Betty. It followed some of her husband's friends to Betty's house, and when it arrived there, it saw Betty and really liked her. The demon didn't see that Betty was a wedded woman because she never did a jingle bell where she ties her soul with her husband's, so the demon saw her as a lonely single soul. That's why the demon wanted to take her as well. She also didn't have that thing where you put on your wall during 8:30, so New Year's, Hmong New Year's, Chipityo, right? Not Chipityo. So her house was not protected by those demons and ghosts, and that's why they can easily enter. Now she's back to normal and saved. Hallelujah. That's why you guys need to get married the Hmong way. So that way your partner doesn't get dragged by demons. And if you want to learn how to do it, if you each send me $100, I will show you how to do it. So one night, I woke up to some crunching and nibbling sounds. My eyes adjusted to the darkness, and I was listening ever so closely to the crunching noise. I looked down at the foot of my desk, and I see this head of long hair on the floor, and the crunching sound continued. It was like the thing was nibbling on soft bones. I was extremely scared and I quickly woke up my husband. He was kind of dazed and I told him that I was afraid and that he just told me to go back to sleep. I then whispered to him if he heard that and he said, "What?" I said, "The crunching sound," all the while keeping my eyes on the long hair on the ground, and then pointed and whispered, "See that? Hurry on and go turn on the light." He jumps out of bed and turns on the light and walks over to my desk, bends down and turns to me with the hair, and he says, "Isn't this your stupid hair extension?" And I was like, "Oh, yeah, but what about the crunching sound I heard?" Then he opens the closet door and pulls out my Oreo cookies and started to ruffle the plastic covering and said, "Is this the crunching you heard?" And I was like, yes." He said, "It was just the stupid freaking mouse trying to get the cookies. Look, there's even bite marks on one stupid Oreo bag." Then I started laughing. That got me scared for a moment. See guys, ghosts aren't real. This is just, you just gotta use logic and science. Don't forget science. Last year, my brother-in-law and his wife were looking for a house because they wanted to move out. They found this place that my sister-in-law really liked. She said that the front yard was so pretty and the house was so beautiful. The owner was also a Hmong woman and the price that she was offering was very affordable and my sister-in-law wanted to move into it. But before she was going to make an offer, she told her mom about the house she wanted and her mom told her to not buy it. Her friend also told her to not purchase the house because it's cursed. The story goes there that there was a family who moved into that house and not long after, the husband suddenly dies. The cause of death was not explainable since he was a healthy man and all of a sudden he died in his sleep. The second family, the husband of that family was also healthy and not long after moving there, he also suddenly died in his sleep. Then came the third family. They didn't have a father, but they had a grandma who could see perfectly, but became blinded. They did a shaman ceremony and found out that the house was cursed and so they moved out. Soon after they moved out with the grandma, her vision came back and she was finally fine again. So my brother-in-law and his wife asked the owner about the history of the house, and like every other Hmong OG, she lied about it and said that it was perfect, that there's nothing wrong with it. So they ignored the Hmong lady's phone calls and finally told the Hmong owner that they decided to not buy the house. Thank God her mom and her friend warned her about the house, or else my brother-in-law would have been the next victim. Never promise any kinds of promises that you cannot keep. My dad's sister, which is my aunt, made a promise with her ex-boyfriend during her younger teen years. They loved each other so much, but their parents did not approve. So they made promises to each other that if the girl dies first, she can reborn to be his daughter, to be his forever, and if he dies, he'll be reborn to be her son forever. So the guy died before my auntie and is reborn as her son. That's kind of weird, man. Even though he's old enough now into his teens, he still sleeps with his parents, separating the two couples apart from each other. When my auntie and her husband wanted some intimate alone time, her son would knock on the door and pretend to cry so that they couldn't have time together. So one day, my auntie was wondering why she had such a kiddish son who doesn't know how to grow up at all. So she went to see a shaman lady, and they said that when she was young, she and her ex-boyfriend made a promise and held on to each other, that if one dies first, the other will be reborn as their own child and to never be separated. That's why my parents always say never make promises that you cannot keep. Also, don't make promises that are that weird, my dude. Like, come on, it's just common sense. Look, maybe I was wrong. You know how some OGs say that we don't have common sense? You know what? They're as equally bad as we are, okay? Maybe even worse, like this story, for example. I don't know if I told the story yet or not, but anyways, back in Thailand, my dad had this really great girlfriend of his. However, my grandpa did not like her and wanted him to marry my mom instead. Despite the fact that my mom was an orphan, they see her as a loyal and perfect daughter-in-law to have. So my dad was forced to marry my mom, and later after my parents got married, his girlfriend had offed herself. And by offed herself, I mean she killed herself. She suicided. Even though it's been over more than 10 years now, and our family are living in the US, his girlfriend still follows him around. Last year, in 2009, as my mom was sleeping, she heard some ladies talking in her bedroom while she and my dad were asleep. As my mom was asleep, she had her legs crossed over my dad's and she was cuddling up to my dad. Then, all of a sudden, she heard the lady say, "Who does she think she is, holding my man like that? Let's show her some lessons." As soon as my mom heard this, she woke up my dad and told him. Since my mom is a shaman, she came downstairs and grabbed her sword and paper money with some red corn and took it to her room. That night, it went away. After a few weeks, my mom called me and my husband over to come and help because she was doing a shaman ritual ceremony for my dad, since his ex-girlfriend's spirit or ghost said that she was coming for my dad and going to take him away with her for lying and not marrying her. So the two of us came over and they were chasing her out of the house with a powder and fire flame. First, they chased her and fired a flame from my parents' room, and as my sisters and I were in the living room, we heard a huge cry of a lady's voice crying horrifically upstairs from the bedroom. We got the chills and later told my mom. My mom said that perhaps they must have gotten her on fire or something. You know, if you think about it, it is kind of sad. I feel a bit of empathy for the spirit here. I feel a bit of empathy for stories like this. Anyways, let me share with you my story. This happened last weekend during my husband's grandma's funeral. I picked him up at the funeral on my way back from home from Stockton around 9 p.m. and while we were driving home, I realized that something wasn't right. So I asked him where David was. David is our 11-year-old boy. And oh my god, we left the poor kid at the funeral home, so we went back to get him. Sounds like typical home parents. Anyhow, we got home and watched a movie that he had picked out on Netflix. Halfway through the movie, we all fell asleep in the room, when all of a sudden, we heard weird noises coming from outside of the bedroom door. We didn't think much of it and continued to sleep. A couple of minutes later, it happened again, and this time, it sounded more like footsteps, as if someone just came to the hallway and started walking. Finally, my husband got up and grabbed his guns, loaded it, and went to the door. He called out to see if it was his mom or younger brother that might have gotten back from the funeral, but no one answered. Silly as it sounds, we didn't turn on the lights. The room was pitch black, and there he was, trying to be brave in front of me and my son, although I knew deep down he was also scared. We finally turned on the light switch and the three of us walked out into the living room to check if anything out of the ordinary might have happened. He led the way as I was behind him, followed by our son, who was even more terrified. As we made our way back through the hallway, we heard noises coming from the attic, like footsteps running back and forth. By golly, it was the rats. But anyways, the only strange thing that happened was that the computer turned on by itself. Look, okay? That's what they say in the horror movies. It's the rats. This is when you don't use science and logic and you use superstition and belief. When I was expecting my first son, my sisters threw me a baby shower at my in-laws' house. One of my friends from work, Angela, who was white, came to the shower. It was a typical baby shower, games, food, and gifts. The event ended without any issues, and everything seemed perfectly normal. The following Monday, I was at work having lunch with Angela, and we started chatting about the baby shower. She told me she had a great time and loved the food. Then, she mentioned something that caught me off guard. She said she was surprised that my mom understood English, even though she hadn't heard her speak any English during the entire event. I was confused and told her, "My mom wasn't at the baby shower. The only older woman there was my mother-in-law, and she doesn't understand any English." Angela seemed shocked and insisted that there had been another middle-aged Hmong woman at the shower. I told her again that the only older woman present was my mother-in-law, and she wasn't around 40 or 50 years old as Angela described. But Angela was sure. She described the woman slim with neck-length black hair, wearing a floral print shirt and a long skirt. She said the woman had sat near my two sister-in-laws, played games with them, and even got in line for food, smiling and interacting with everyone. Angela was certain that this woman had been a part of the shower the entire time, cheering and clapping when I opened the gifts and acting like any other guest. Her story sent chills down my spine. My in-laws' house had always felt strange to me. The room my husband stayed in was always freezing, no matter how warm the rest of the house was, even during California summers. I once had a dream where an elderly woman told me that the room was cold because she had died in it. I often woke up at 3:30 a.m. to prepare lunch for my husband, who left for work at 5 a.m. Every time I was alone in the kitchen, I could feel the hairs on my neck stand up. I was too afraid to look around, feeling like someone was watching me, so I would always hum to myself quietly and hurry through my tasks. After we moved out, my brother-in-law and his wife moved into that room. One day, she randomly recorded a video on her phone while inside the room. When she looked back at the video, she noticed a dark figure in the footage. She couldn't figure out who it was or what it was, but it scared her enough that she immediately deleted the video. Thinking back to the baby shower, I couldn't recall any other woman being there with my sister-in-laws. It was just the two of them, and they were partnered up for the games. I asked my sister to check the photos that she had taken during the event, hoping to see if this mysterious woman would appear in any of them. My sister said that there was nothing unusual in the pictures, just some odd light spots here and there, but no woman matching Angela's description. I told my husband about what Angela had seen, and he mentioned it to my father-in-law. His response sent another chill down my spine. He calmly said, "Angela has never been to our house, so the lady let her see her. Angela wouldn't know that she wasn't human. We shouldn't worry about it. She isn't hurting us. Let her be as she is letting us be." My in-laws still live in that house. According to my father-in-law, shamans aren't afraid of the supernatural because spirits have no power over them.